Guys, we need to talk. The idea of expensive Endgame keyboards, the concept, the notion, is dead. With the explosion of the mechanical keyboard hobby that we've seen in the past 1 to 2 years, the technology advancements in just the construction of keyboards, the innovation we've seen in things like the mounting system, and simply just what's included in today's keyboard kits, the idea of an endgame or an expensive endgame keyboard just doesn't exist anymore. You're seeing today entry-level keyboard kits that are outperforming expensive endgame keyboards from a year or so ago, and I think that's going to continue to happen as the hobby continues to grow and we continue to see advancement like we've seen recently in some of these entry-level keyboards that have been released. Now, yes, I understand that somebody can buy a keyboard that they've been saving up for, that they've had their eye on for a while, and to them, that is their endgame keyboard. I get it. But there's always going to be something that comes along that beats it out in all categories, and lately, it seems like entry-level keyboards are doing that. And speaking of categories, in the quest for your personal endgame keyboard, I think there's probably 3 main categories that most of us look to. And those are looks, sound, and overall feel or typing experience. And for something to be considered endgame worthy, it's probably going to have to excel in all 3 of those categories. Now, how you prioritize these categories and what's important to you versus somebody else is going to vary a lot. So I get that an endgame keyboard can be very different person to person. And that's kind of what makes this hobby so fun. A keyboard you love, somebody else might not really love, and vice versa. So I don't even know why I'm making this video. To play out what I'm talking about here though, let's take a look at the Iron 180 from Smith & Roon. A gorgeous looking keyboard that carries a pretty hefty price tag and was sold in November 2020, ended up shipping in June or July of 2021. Now this keyboard at the time of release was probably considered a very endgame worthy keyboard. It's got the insanely nice looks, it's got the gasket mounting system that people were after, and depending on how you built it up and what your sound profile preference is, it's got the sound factor as well, although I know that's kind of disputed out there by the enthusiasts. Now, to be fair, I don't think this keyboard really wows you in terms of sound. Now, it definitely doesn't sound bad by any means. I personally like the way it sounds, but I know others might disagree. However, in terms of looks, in my opinion, it doesn't get much better than the Iron 180. I mean, the brass bottom with that Smith & Roon logo is pretty iconic in the keyboard world. I remember when I was getting into the hobby first seeing that and being pretty floored at how gorgeous that keyboard looked. Now, in terms of feel, it does have a daughter board and some flex cuts, but with the carbon fiber plate I have this built up with here, there isn't much flex to the typing experience. Now, if you're not a fan of flexy keyboards, then that doesn't really matter. I personally love the crisp sound and feel of a hard plate like a brass or a carbon fiber, but others might not agree, and that's the beauty of this hobby, to each their own. So again, this is all personal, but I think the Iron 80 to me checks the box definitely for looks, and I think it checks it enough for sound and feel. Now, if you're a fan of flexy keyboards, this is definitely a no-go for you as it's a pretty stiff typing experience. But back in November 2020, when you were shelling out money for this Smith & Roon keyboard, was that considered endgame worthy? I think it probably was. However, the price tag, especially for the way I have this one built up, is pretty insane to me. Now to the other end of the spectrum, the entry-level keyboard. Now back in the day, an entry-level keyboard used to be something like the Tofu 60. It was cheap, bare bones, it got you into the hobby with no frills. Now the Tofu 60 I have here today is $180, and that gets you an aluminum case, a hot swap PCB, and a brass plate. So there's no foam dampening, there's no stabilizers, and this is a tray mount keyboard, meaning a pretty stiff typing experience, a hollow sound potentially with no dampening, and an inconsistent sound as well across the board due to that tray mount style. Now, the Tofu 60 does have a special place in my heart, as it was my first dive into the mechanical keyboard world, and I actually still use mine pretty regularly because of that nostalgic feel for me. But I can definitely recognize that the Tofu 60 is far from an Endgame keyboard. But today we have budget level keyboards coming out like the QK65 that are totally shaking up the keyboard scene and kind of expanding what people thought were possible in the entry level keyboard. And in my opinion, they're kind of threatening Endgame keyboards. I mean, this entry-level keyboard could be somebody's Endgame keyboard. The QK65 comes in at $170, and for that price you get a gasket mount aluminum keyboard with a detachable bottom weight. But to note, the Iron 180 is a true heavy brass bottom weight. This is a piece of stainless steel painted gold. So there is a difference there. You get a hot swap PCB, a ton of foam inserts for dampening, a USB-C cable, a carrying case, and my version came with stabilizers as well. So comparing all that with the QK65 at 170 to what you get with a Tofu 60 at 180 is just a silly comparison. It kind of totally eliminates the Tofu 60 at all, in my opinion. Now, the big question is, can you compare the QK65 at that 170 price point to the Iron 180, an Endgame, almost $1,000 keyboard of a year past? It might be kind of a stupid question, but that's basically what the whole video is about, so let's do it. The cost. The Iron 180 that I have built up here costs $895. It's kind of painful just to say that. For that insane price tag, you get the keyboard, obviously, which is an aluminum case keyboard. It's a gasket mount style. You get this really gorgeous brass bottom with the Smith & Roon logo. You get a plate and a solder PCB. And that's it. Versus the QK65, it comes in at 170. You get arguably a better gasket mounting style end system with those removable socks or sleeves. I personally like it better. You get all of the foam and silicone dampening that comes with it. You get all of those accessories that I mentioned previously as well. But let's hear how they compare in terms of sound when typing on them. Now obviously sound is subjective, so I'm sure some of you out there prefer the sound of the Iron 180 over the sound of the QK65 and vice versa. Drop a comment down below and let me know. Maybe it's overwhelmingly the QK65 or maybe it's kind of split. I'd love to know. And hey, while you're down there, if you wouldn't mind clicking the sub button, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks. Now, the overarching theme is that a lot of this stuff is subjective. It comes down to your personal preference and what is your endgame worthy keyboard. But one thing I don't think anyone can deny is the innovation we're seeing today, especially in the entry-level keyboard category, and just the sheer amount of stuff you're getting in these keyboard kits continues to grow. I'm sure some of you at this point in the video have found yourselves liking the QK65 more than the Iron 180, and that statement alone is pretty insane when you think about the two price points that these keyboards fall in. I'm really excited to see where this hobby goes in the next year or two. We've got companies like Owl Lab and QWERTY Keys that are currently changing the game. We've got companies like Final Mouse saying that they're about to change the game. We'll see. So I think the next year or so is going to be a really fun time in this hobby. Hopefully we'll see some really cool innovation, and I feel like there's probably going to be a few endgame purchases by us all in the next year that quickly get beat out by the next thing that comes along. Hope you all enjoyed today's video. Drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think of the status of today's keyboard space. Let me know if you like the QK65, the Iron 180, or if you're a true old school tofu fan. And while you're down there, please subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. In the next few videos, I have some really fun and unique boards that I'm going to be building, so definitely subscribe down below. And until next time, happy typing.